Welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. If you enjoy our content, please like or subscribe.
Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. I'm DV LeBron. Do you have any construction needs? Maybe you need to get your roof done. Maybe you just want to build a pergola for summer. Check out K&H Construction. Chris Helms out of Waxahachie. He'll take care of you. Let him know DV LeBron sent you. Today, my very special guest is Mr. Ed Harrison, who is a school board member for MISD, who's running for re-election. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you. It's good to talk to you. Thanks for having me on your show, DV.
Thank you for coming on. I want to thank people publicly for their prayers for my family and those issues. I didn't think I was going to be able to get to cover this year's election, and it might be like this year, but I wanted to get MISD in definitely because you're running against Miss Whitney Krupala, and I plan on having her on as well. And for this board seat that you've been in for what, 3 years now, 4 years?
They are 3-year terms. Yes, I'm just now completing my first term. And for those of you who don't know, the election begins this coming Monday, the 20th, and then it's Mrs. Tuesday, then it's Wednesday through Saturday, and then Monday and Tuesday, then the following Saturday is May the 2nd. That's the election day.
Yeah, it's coming quick. And I was telling you it's coming quick. You were like, not if you're the candidate. You've been running around and you're doing all these discussions. So there are some people, a lot of people who just moved here, maybe don't know you. Can you give me a quick bio on you?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for the question. I have lived here. My wife and I have lived here. Our family moved here about 26, 27 years ago. Actually, the first time I came to Ellis County, I was 15 years old. I lived in Maypearl. My kids went to school here in Ellis County, and I was a home builder and a land developer. I started my own business, and I ran it successfully for 40 years, and we did developments. We built custom homes all over the Metroplex area. It was a very successful business. I was very blessed, worked very hard. I retired from that 5 years ago, and I've been involved in other activities. I've served on the board of advisors for Charlton Methodist Hospital for 15 years. Now I'm on the Midlothian Methodist Hospital Board of Advisors for the last several years. I was an adjunct professor for 15 years at Dallas Baptist University. But probably the most important thing is my wife and I, my wife Trish, we've been married for 48 years. We have 3 kids, and they are all married. And we also have 10 grandchildren, and they range in ages from, she'll be 6 years old tomorrow. That's the youngest. And our oldest is 19, and she is running track now at a university. She's on academic scholarship and a track scholarship. I'm very proud of my family. And more than I am proud, I'm very thankful for my family. And I'm thankful to be part of this community. I've been, like I said, 1 term on the school board, and I've been very excited to be part of the Midlothian School Board.
And I tell every candidate, thank you for wanting to serve your community. In your case, continue to serve your community. And this rough and tumble thing that could be Ellis County politics sometimes, it can get interesting. So why do you want to do this again, Ed?
In my first term, I've worked very, very hard. I've had 4 goals. I wanted to work for parents. I want parents to have complete transparency. They should know everything that's going on with their students, whether it's first grade through 12th grade. Everything that we do as a district, everything that goes in the classroom should be transparent. They should see that. Second, I work very hard for our students. Student safety is an imperative. We got to make sure our kids are safe in all facets. And the other is that I have pushed very hard for us to become an A district. In order to do that, student test scores need to increase. And I have been one of the most outspoken board members. If you go back and watch the videos, I'm the one continually talking about we need to be an A district. I applaud that we have now 3 schools who are A-rated schools. And I think that's outstanding, but I want our entire district to be an A-rated district. And so I work for parents, for transparency, for student test scores and student safety. Also, I think that I am the only member who has voted for pay increase for teachers ever since I came on the board. As a matter of fact, our very first budget, I found out that the district had promised the teachers a 2% pay increase. When I was told that, I said, we need to reduce the fat in the budget so we can give our teachers a 2% pay increase. I was told that there was no fat in the budget. Unfortunately, 6 months later, we found out that there was a projected $6 million deficit. Now, I don't know how the prior administration did not foresee that, but there was fat in the budget. And the point I'm making is that if we had cut the budget earlier, we could have given the teachers that year a 2% pay increase. So I voted against that budget. And every time the teachers' pay has been an issue, I have supported that. We need to support our teachers in the classroom in the disciplinary issues that they're having, if any, in the classroom. We need to make sure our teachers are safe and they're able to teach. And the last thing that I've worked for, in addition to parents and students and teachers, I have worked very hard. I'm the only member of the school board who has voted not just to lower your tax rate, but I have advocated lower your tax bill so that what you pay on your home is less, or your property, not just your home, but if you own other properties here in the Midlothian ISD, I have advocated for a lower tax bill because I believe that when you take money from our families, that you are taking away some freedom. Let me illustrate this. Let's say you have a couple kids in the MISD and your property tax goes up. Well, you have less freedom to buy them clothes to attend MISD. You have less freedom for vacation. You have less freedom for things that you enjoy. And some of those things could be essentials that you have less freedom for providing. So those things I have worked very hard on. And I believe the job is not done. If I'm reelected, if I have the honor of being reelected, I will continue to vote or to fight for parents, for students, and for teachers. And I will always be the fighter for lower property tax bills. As a matter of fact, in this campaign, I am the only candidate who has the experience to make that happen. I am the only candidate who has never advocated or voted for a tax increase while in this position.
I do plan on covering taxes and budget in this interview because I know you're passionate about those things and others. Would you say that this term has been successful for you?
I would say this term was anybody who gets into any new position, a new board of directors, whatever it may be, there's a learning curve. And of course, I have a learning curve. I feel like every meeting is a new learning curve. And so, yeah, it has. I feel like that we've accomplished quite a bit, or that I've accomplished quite a bit. Let me tell you something I'm most proud of. I think it was June or July of 24. I had been working to get a resolution passed within the MISD policy. And the resolution says this, simply stated, only a biological boy can go into a boy's restroom, locker room, etc. And only a biological girl can do the same, the girls' restrooms, locker rooms, etc. Until I pushed that policy and we got it approved, we didn't have a policy like that. So it was obscure. But now we have a policy saying, no, only biological boys can use boys' restrooms. Only biological girls can use girls' restrooms. So yeah, I think I've been successful. I fought for lower taxes every time it comes across, and for student safety, and for other things that I'm very proud of.
One of the things that your critics say is that sometimes you're divisive, or that you're raising concerns that maybe are not in the district, but maybe somewhere else. Can you kind of address that?
Yeah, I'd love to. I have said, I have heard it said, as a matter of fact, TASB, Texas Association of School Boards, says this, and I can produce the document, that the people who elect me are not my constituency. It says that the district is my constituency. In other words, I am not to listen to the people who voted for me. TASB trains our trustees to listen to them more than to listen to the voters who voted for them. And that's not me making that up. That is actually what TASB teaches. That's in their documents, and I can produce it for you. So when you say I have been divisive, well, sometimes divisiveness is good. If we're going to implement policies because some taxpayer-funded association says that we should implement policies, and those policies are liberal, or they don't benefit teachers, parents, or students, then yeah, I will be divisive. If those policies that are advocated are going to raise our citizens' taxes and take away freedom, then I guess I will be divisive. But I think I want to flip that around. You've got to have somebody to give a contrarian view. If all 7 members of the school board are always in agreement with whatever is advocated, then why have a school board? You've got to have somebody who is willing to advocate for the public, the taxpayers, the students, the teachers, and the citizens. And so I try to be agreeable as much as I can. I try to go along with those things that I think are good policy. And I think if you go back and look at my votes, there's been more votes where I've agreed with the majority of the people on the board. But let me tell you one that I was really pleased with the other day. We had just implemented a new policy. When I say we, the MISD board has just implemented another policy. I want to explain this for those people who are unaware of this new policy. Open enrollment was discussed 6-10 months ago or so, and the consensus was that the trustees did not want open enrollment. Well, recently we passed a policy, the board passed a policy, and it said this, that if one house is in a large district, in a large residential community, and that one house, maybe out of 1,000 new lots, that one house is within the MISD boundary lines, then that house, any other house within that community, can make application to attend MISD. So that is a form of open enrollment. Now, during the board meeting, I expressed my concern about this. And I said, so you are telling me that if one house in a 1,000-lot development is within MISD boundary lines, a house 1 mile away, but still within that development, can make application and they can access our district? And they said, yes, that is what's going to happen. And so that caused me problems on several levels, because we are not allowing homeschool or private school to participate in UIL activities at MISD. And MISD, if a kid signed up for football, the MISD would receive $1,500 for that student. If they signed up for baseball, they'd get $1,500 for that activity also. We've said, no, those tax-paying citizens are not allowed to participate. But now we have voted in a policy that allows these people who are not even taxpayers to attend MISD if they meet the qualifications. Now, I was real happy on that one. It was a divided vote. But Ryan Tim, the president of the board, voted with me on that one. I opposed that policy. And so, yeah, there was divisiveness. And at that point, Ryan Tim was right along with me in the divisive activity there, on divisive.
What was the reason for that? Why did the district or why did the board bring that up for discussion, and the majority voted for it? What was the reasoning behind voting yes on it?
Well, the administration brought it to us, and the board took it up as a potential revenue stream. The more students that we have in our district, the more revenue we have. And if we have vacant seats, I see some feasibility to it. But what I'm concerned about is, what about those districts that the tax rate is not as high as our tax rate? Are our taxpayers subsidizing those other students? We're not getting the tax money. Let's say a student comes in from district XYZ. Well, the other district is still receiving their tax revenue, but we're subsidizing them to a degree. Now, I know the state is going to make us whole on that, but that's essentially double dipping the state. What we needed to do is see if there's other students who would like to attend MISD from within our district before we did that open enrollment type thing.
Do you think that?
And apparently Ryan agreed with me on that.
You have, and you had mentioned this earlier about when we were talking about the whole divisive thing. Do you think that the school board, you have one employee, and that would be the superintendent? That is the one employee of the school board. At least that's how I've been told. And so you have one employee that you're over. Do you think that the board has, made sure that things were accountable and transparent with that one employee and the way the district was moving? Do you think that the board maybe was too agreeable or not agreeable? What were your thoughts in the last 3 years about that?
I think we have a good superintendent. I really like David Building. I like him personally. That doesn't mean I agree with everything he says. And because I don't agree with everything he says doesn't mean I don't respect him. I respect him tremendously. But the goal or the role of any school board in the state of Texas is, the budget, the policy, the tax rate, and overseeing. You are correct. We have one employee, and that is the superintendent. We are not necessarily to agree with him. We are to advise him. And when he's wrong, we are to state that we think he's wrong, or at least advocate that we do think that he's wrong and we need to go a different direction. I have heard so often people say, and I think my opponent has said, I want to support the superintendent. I want to support the superintendent. Well, so do I. But I also want to counsel the superintendent. And when I think the superintendent is leading down the wrong path, I'm going to question that. And once again, if the job of any school board is to rubber stamp what the administration wants, then why have a school board? Why debate anything? just shove the policy out there and all 7 of us rubber stamp it and go home early. As a matter of fact, I had one trustee in a meeting with me say, "You ask too many questions. I get home too late." And I responded, "If you thought this was a 5:30 to 7:30 meeting, then maybe you should resign. We need to discuss all things thoroughly. And in order to discuss all things thoroughly, we need to ask questions." Let me give you an example of that. There was a policy regarding chaplains within the MISD. I do not care whether you were for it or against it. During the discussion portion of that policy implementation, the state gave us a certain time that we had to either accept or reject this new policy. I asked the presenter of this policy, "Did you read the legislation?" And he said, "No, not all of it." I was shocked because the legislation was 1.5 double-page print. That was it. When he said I did not read all of it, he was being disingenuous. And what he was saying is, I don't want to tell you I didn't read it. He was reading talking points about the policy rather than discussing the policy. So when you ask questions, the board is obligated to ask questions, whether it's on a financial report, a policy change, anything. It doesn't mean the board is antagonistic or a board member is antagonistic. What it means is we want the truth. And by the way, since my constituency is those people who voted for me last time, and I got over 57% of the vote, and I'm very thankful and humbled by that. But my constituency wants me to ask the questions. They want me to ask in a polite way and get the answer. I'll tell you another one. Tax rate versus tax bill. Tax rate versus tax bill. Some of the trustees will say, we keep lowering the tax rate. But you know what? Property tax bills go up. Because when you lower the tax rate, you take the decimal point and you go out to the right 4 spots and you reduce it by 1 or 2 numbers, the tax bill is still going up. There was one meeting I kept asking a black and white question. I said, it is not the same to lower the tax rate. That does not equate to a lower tax bill. And the staff would not give me a direct answer until I asked the question 4 or 5 times in different ways. And finally, they said, that is correct. So the job of the trustee is to represent the parents, the students, the teachers, the employees of our district and do the best job possible, and the taxpayers. And that's what I always will do. I will not be the one that will conform. I will be the one for standing for what I think is right and for standing for the constituency. That's the people who elected me.
And we're going to go into taxes and budget, but I wanted to ask you one last question before we transition into that. Are there any votes in the last 3 years that you regret?
There probably are. And you got me cold on that one.
Sorry.
Yeah, there probably are. I'd have to think about that for a while. I think anybody that says they voted right 100% of the time, I don't know. I know that there have been excruciating votes where I have had to vote on something and I'm struggling, really, really struggling, because I want to do what's right. I want to do what's right for all involved, and not just right, but I want to conform to our policy. I want to tell you, there was one issue that came up. It was a grievance. I can't go into detail on it, but the vote on that one, it like to tore my heart out. But because the policy stated that the district was this way, I could not vote outside of following the letter of the policy, which is following the letter of the law, essentially. And that's what I did. But that one was one that really, it really gnawed at me.
So taxes, because you've been talking about this, taxes and budget. MISD is projecting a deficit, and it might change because school funding is wonky. It goes all over the place, but it might change. But they're projecting a deficit again. Now this is, and I plan on having Dr. Belding and the President Ryan Tim on to talk budget and taxes for this year. But it looks like a projected, millions something shortage. Last year it was like 6 million, but it came down after a land sale and some other things. And I believe the year before there was a problem as well. Do you think that the district is doing a good enough job projecting some of these things that come up, and why is this happening year after year? You've been on the board. You know, the board's been there. A lot of the board members have been there a while. What's going on here?
Well, let me go back with you, because the projection right now in our last workshop was about $4 million, give or take. And that's before we included any pay raise for any employees, period. About $4 million. Now, I want to go back to when I first got on the board, 23-24 budget. That was the one I alluded to earlier with the 2% pay increase. That was the budget I voted against because it didn't cut out fat. So 6 months into Dr. Belding's tenure here at MISD, Dr. Belding called each of the board members in and said there is now a projected $6 million deficit. And that was shocking. So I want to go back on that. After running a business, I had accountants and I had bookkeepers, I had CFO that I worked with. If someone had missed a $6 million projected deficit, I don't think they would have had their job very long after that. So I want to go back and say, what did the staff miss? And I talked to Dr. Belding about it. I said, you checked all this stuff out. He said, yeah, I thought we were in good shape. But that projection of $6 million blindsided everybody. So I got to go back and say, what did the staff miss? Now, I know funding changes in ISD. I got that. But $6 million. Now, to his credit, the ISD reduced expenses within just maybe a month to 3 months. I don't remember the time frame. And they cut literally $1.5 million out of that budget. We ended that year from a $6 million deficit. We ended that year at about, I think, $600,000 deficit. So then the next year we had the same thing, a projected deficit of about $3 million. And I think we ended 300,000 into the positive. And there was a sale of land, which is about $1 million. And then also there was this year now. So we come into this third year, projected deficit of about 400,000. But already Belding has said, hey, you know what? I don't think it's going to be that high. So we don't have all the income in. But yeah, right, as far as where we are right now, in our last workshop, Dr. Belding had projected about $4 million budget deficit. And that's before we had any kind of employee pay onto that. But I want to go back and give you a little bit of history since I've been on the board. Our first budget that I was involved with was for 23-24. And that's the budget I had alluded to earlier. That's the one that promised a 2% pay increase for teachers, but it did not include that. And that's the budget I said had too much fat. And by the way, I was ridiculed by other board members by saying it had too much fat. As a matter of fact, one staff member ridiculed me and said that we cut all the fat out of this possible. About 6 months into Dr. Belding's tenure, he called each one of the board members in. And he told us that they are now projecting a $6 million deficit. Now, as a businessman who's had CPAs and accountants work for me, if somebody missed a $6 million budget shortfall, if they didn't see that coming, there was a real problem. The staff member that missed this is no longer with the administration right now. But I've got to go back and ask, how did they do that? How did they miss that? I asked Dr. Belding, I said, you checked all these numbers out before you took the job, right? And he said, yes. And he said that he didn't see this coming. Well, regardless, it came. But I got to commend Dr. Belding because within a month to 3 months, they had really cut $1.5 million out of the budget. But we ended that year, and I'm doing all these numbers from memory, we ended that year, instead of a $6 million budget, we were like $500,000 to $800,000 deficit that year. Now, deficit is never good, but we did in that year. Year 2 budget, we went into that, and there was projected a $3 million deficit. After it was all done, we ended with a positive, I think, of $300,000 positive. Now, I got to confess to you, there was a one-off sale. We did sell a piece of unutilized property that we would never use. The ISD would never use. So we sold that, and that helped us get into $300,000. It was about $1 million sale. Now here we are into this year, and the state is funding the students more than ever before, and they're projecting a $4 million shortfall. But even Dr. Belding, if you listen to the recording of the workshop last whenever it was, a few weeks ago, if you listen to that recording, even Dr. Belding says, I don't think it's going to be this bad. And so each of the trustees talked about their ideas and such. And when it came to me, Mr. Vineyard asked me my thoughts. And I said, you know, we've been down this road. And I quoted these statistics before. The statistics I just gave you. about the prior years. I said, let's see at the next workshop what these numbers really look like, because we're going to have more facts and more figures. And Dr. Belding agreed. He said, I don't think it will be this bad. So here's the bottom line. We don't have all the numbers. These are preliminary, but I think that we can do a better job at reducing some costs. I know we've cut a lot, but I still think there's some numbers we can cut. And that's my thinking on this.
Do you think they're forecasting good enough, the staff?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Do you believe that the staff is forecasting these things good enough?
I am not going to suggest there's anything malicious or incompetent on the part of the staff.
No,
I think our staff right now is excellent. I really like her. I think she's doing a good job. But I think that what we've got to look at when you run a business budget, you forecast what your sales and your profits are going to be, and you build a budget to match that. In this case, I think ISDs to some degree build a budget. Then they go around saying, how come we don't have the revenues to support the budget? So it's a little bit backwards from how business works. And I think I wish we could take more of a business approach. Now, I have suggested to Dr. Belding once, I said, I wish we could get a business expert to come in here and analyze how we do business. What is it that we could refine and hone and really get a handle on? Let me give you an example of budgeting for just a moment. I asked for a list of all the consultants and associations that we paid membership to. A budget workshop about a year ago, it was laid on us, a 11 by 17 piece of paper. I didn't know it was going to be given to us. And it had all the associations and consultants listed by year and what we had paid to those associations and consultants. And I was ridiculed right there in the board meeting. One of the board members said, well, we're in the weeds. This is not our purview. And I said, wait a minute. If I had not asked for this, we would not have known how much money we were spending. And one of the purviews of the board is finance. And so what we found out is that year over year, 26% had been cut in those consultants and associations. Now, as a businessman, if you tell me I could have bought concrete for 26% less than what I paid for it, I got to ask the question, were we spending too much? And that goes back to when we cut $1.5 million and then several other millions. Were we spending too much? Were we refining our budget and what we're buying, getting it lower and lower and lower, and still not cutting the quality for parents, for students, for teachers, and hopefully keeping our taxpayer bills lower than they have been? Let me give you another example. Shelley Blaylock, who is head of C&I at MISD, who I really like, and I think she's very competent. I've been on the C&I committee subcommittee since I was elected. When this happened, this deficit happened back in 23-24, she told us in the meeting that they had cut their C&I budget 26%. Now, in that meeting, I asked her to clarify. I said, is this a decrease and increase? And she started laying out the numbers, and it was a real 26% increase. I commended her. I said, this is a great job. And after the meeting, I looked at her. I said, tell me how you did that. She said, because of the financial issue, we went through every program, everything that we are doing, and we found programs that we had subscriptions to that no one, zero people were using, but we were still paying subscriptions for that. We canceled those subscriptions and we did other things like that, and we were able to cut our costs 26%. So I have to ask the question, in the year prior, were we paying 26% too much? If we were able to cut those without any problem, were we paying 26% too much? And I would have to beg, the answer is yes. Let me give you one more. As long as we are a member of TASB, we are paying too much money. The trustees are required to take continual training, and we get a report every year whether that training is done or not, and it should be done. Well, you can do that by going to a TASB convention. I don't go to TASB conventions. I don't go, and the reason I don't go is it costs taxpayers. So if you go to an out of local area TASB meeting, the taxpayers are going to pay for the transportation, the hotel room, and the registration. So what I did is I took it online. I sat right here and I took it online, and then I went to a Region 10 office because there was one class I had to take live. So I thought, I compared the cost. I asked what the cost would be if I went to a convention and took those classes. It would be $500 for the taxpayers. They would have to pay that. Or for me, it was $100 to get all up to date. And what I believe in is that The trustees should be as thrifty as what we're asking everybody else to be. And the trustees should be honoring the taxpayer and not using taxpayer money to go to these meetings where they are then fed by vendors of the district, like lawyers, CPAs, or architects. They buy the dinners in some of those meetings. And if that were on the federal level, that type of lobbying would be illegal. So I'm in favor of cutting the cost everywhere.
Yeah. And, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was the taxes. And you have been a proponent for no new revenue for a long time. It's something that, you like to keep the taxes low. And property taxes, to be fair, a lot of people are suffering under property taxes, especially like some of the tax or some of the appraisals dropped recently. And like my house went up 30%. There are some other houses that went up a lot more. As far as the valuations from the appraisal district. And that means they're going to be paying a lot more. So you have been a proponent of no new revenue. Talk to me about your stance on taxes, because we have been lowering the rate, and you had talked about that earlier. The district has been lowering the rate, and they have a homestead exemption of 10%, I believe. But, now you have a situation where, we might be in deficit spending again. So talk to me about what's going to be your approach when it comes to the tax rate this year.
Yeah, let me go back and address the last thing that you said. And you did make a good point, deficit spending. I don't like deficit spending, but you can't always be going back to the taxpayer. I want the people who are listening to this, I want you to think about this for just a second. Taxing entities, whether it's an ISD, a city, an ESD, whether it's the federal or the state government, they will come to you and say, hey, we want you to pay more taxes. They never ask, can you afford more taxes? Can your kids afford less? They just say, we want you to pay more. And a lot of times they don't give you any advance notice. We have got a trustee who called our taxpayers stingy and greedy. That's just wrong. Our taxpayers are the lifeline of this very good school district that I'm very proud of. But for them to sit at the dais and to call our taxpayers stingy and greedy, that's wrong. They're insulting the people who pay our bills. Speaking of the homestead exemption, we have a trustee who said, if they won't give it to us in higher taxes, then we'll just take the homestead exemption back from them. Well, wait a minute. The homestead exemption was given to help taxpayers, and I think it should stay in place. Now, as far as taxes and deficits, I am all about lower taxes, but I know we need enough taxes to run the district. But we go back to, do we build the budget based upon what our expected income is, or do we build the budget on what we want and then try to get the income up to that? And those are my concerns. I want to use the business approach and do the former approach rather than the latter. We want to build our budget to what we see our revenue is going to be. And that's hard. Now, the NNR that you mentioned, the state implemented NNR, no new revenue rate, which is a horrible name for that. And by the way, the NNR does not mean that the taxing entities get no new revenue. What it means is it's a balance so that the taxpayer knows that in a given year, that if a taxing entity goes above that NNR rate that Richard Rozier's office publishes by law every year, that they are incurring a tax increase. That's what that means. Now, of all the funding, whether it's city, county, state, whatever, I think the most complicated is school funding. And public schools, I wish it were much simpler. Dr. Belding has told me he doesn't thoroughly understand all of it, so I'm in good company if I tell you I don't understand all of it. NNR is not totally applicable for an ISD because we have something called a compression rate. So what we have to do is look at the NNR. Anything above that is a true tax increase. And we have to say, how close can we get to that? Considering we have a compression rate that the state sets, there is some variance in that. It's not in concrete. But we have to do everything we can. And we have to stop with the deficit budgeting and come back and say, based upon the numbers that we have for revenue, here's where we can be at a balanced budget and work from that.
When you look at, and there's some people who have complained about, the state funding for schools in Texas, and some have said it hasn't increased since 2019. And there, I know that there was a bill in the last session where they gave some to school funding. I don't exactly know how that works. but you have people who said that there hasn't been an increase from the state since 2019. Do you think that in general, the funds that are all funneling into schools or MISD, do you think that it's getting enough of it is getting to the classroom?
No, I answered that very quickly. No, I don't. As a matter of fact, I want to come back and talk about the funding, but I want to talk about TIA, teacher incentive allotment. I have advocated for a teacher who performs and they meet the criteria. The state of Texas will give them a bonus. It's significant. I don't know the exact amount. I think it's $5,000 to $8,000 a year, and it's over a certain number of years, so it's guaranteed. And they have that TIA coming in. Well, MISD takes 10% off the top for implementing it, for setting up the TIA program within the district. And it does cost some money to utilize the TIA program, excuse me, or to provide the TIA program for our teachers, but it's essential. So I think that MISD should pass on 100% of the TIA bonus from the state of Texas to our teachers. They're the ones who earned it. They're the ones who deserved it. And that would be a quick and easy pay raise for our teachers. That money is meant for the teachers. Now, when I proposed this, my opponent and some others have said, oh, they have even said that's illegal. But no, there are districts now who are passing on 100% of that money to the teachers. So I advocate for that. And I will continue to advocate for that. Now, as far as budgeting, and the state has not raised what they're giving schools. The state did raise what they're giving schools. There is more money coming in from the state right now to MISD and to other districts than ever in the history of the state of Texas. As a matter of fact, DB, let me ask you a question. How many dollars do you think the state of Texas spends on public education this year?
It's somewhere around 18,000. Am I right?
Well, the aggregate, you're not far off per student, but it's a trick question. Let me answer it for you. About $110 billion is spent on public education, more than ever before. The average is $19,000 per student is spent on public education. So the ADA has gone up, the aggregate has gone up, it has all gone up. And last year, there was a pass-through of $5,000 for the teachers because the state legislature is trying to get money to the teachers to incentivize good teachers to stay in our district. And let me give you a good note. Since Dr. Belding has been here, our retention rate for our teachers and others has gone way up. So he's done a tremendous job on that. But we also need to make our teacher pay competitive. And to answer your question, we need to make sure more money goes into the classroom. One of the things that I appreciate the administration doing as far as advising us about potential areas to cut costs, you're not going to believe what I'm about to say to you, is they said we can charge for electricity for teachers who bring their own microwaves to the classroom. We can charge them $5 a month or $10 a month. When they first presented this to me, I had a sense of, do I celebrate the fact that they're looking for every penny? Or do I laugh at this concept? And fortunately, I'm not the only one who doesn't accept that concept. But what we're saying is one of the ideas to cut spending or to cut our cost is we charge the teacher for the electricity for the microwave oven. No. How about this? We get our trustees to stop spending money on TASB conventions. We get our district to cut out more association, more consultation fees. And we get down to the bottom line where it meets the income and the budget come together. And so that's what I'm going to advocate for.
You talked about this, and that's teacher retention. And I'm happy to hear what you said about that in the school retaining teachers. Do you think that there's things that you can do better to make, because not everything is money. Some, it could be the teachers having to deal with discipline issues. It can be the scheduling. The work-life balance is, I think that's the phrase they use nowadays, the work-life balance. And there's things that can be done that are not necessarily monetary, like maybe 410s for a shift, or rotating shift. Do you think that the board has looked at enough options like that? Would you like to see things like that?
I'm always for looking at anything that makes, especially our teacher load, make it easier on the teachers to perform with excellence. And I think that one of the things is not just revenue, how much money they're making. That's very important. That's the bottom line. What you make is, in our culture, is a sign of what you're worth. And so I think that they are invaluable, and we've got to keep our very good teachers in our classroom. Survey I just saw said that the most influential person in a student's life is their teacher. So they spend all these hours every day, year after year after year. We've got to keep the teachers who are positive, but we've also got to support the teachers when there's classroom disruption and classroom discipline problems. I think the side that we've got to fall down on is, how do we take care of the teacher? How do we mitigate the problems? How do we prop them up and let them know we're behind them? And that's the side I always come down to. When we've had issues, and there have been some, I always ask, are we supporting the teacher? Are we doing what's right for the teacher? We've always got to protect our students. We got to make sure our students are safe and that they're learning. They've got to read, write, do all the other things at grade level. So that's always there. But yeah, if there's opportunist ways, if there's opportunities, should I say, to improve the workload of the teacher and give them more gratitude, I'm all in favor of that.
I wanted to ask you, kind of change subjects here. And you had mentioned it earlier about there's another school now that has gotten an A rating, I believe is what you said. As far as academics are concerned in this last 3 years, are you happy with how the district has handled academics, or would you like to see more?
We had a unique problem with our salutatorian and valedictorian this last year. I think it was at HHS, and it was a good problem. We had 2 students achieving so high, it was mind-boggling. And then as far as who was valedictorian, who was salutatorian, I don't want to get into all the details. But I told somebody, I said, this is a great problem. We've got students excelling to that level. That's amazing to me. So there are good things going on. Our 3 A campuses, I believe, are Long Branch, Walnut Grove, and MHS, Midlothian High School. I'm so proud of that. People talk about, oh, you're not MISD proud because you don't support all the tax increases or you question things. I'm very MISD proud. But the benchmark, the measurement of how we do as a district is our individual campuses. And we have some great staff, some great principals, some great APs, and some excellent teachers who I've gotten to know over these last 3 years, and I really, really admire. But we got other campuses that we got to bring them up. And so when we do that, we bring those test scores up, we're going to achieve that A rating, and our student success is going to be phenomenal. So yeah, I'm very proud of our district, and I want it to continue to grow, continue to excel. And I've got to give some credit, a lot of credit to Dr. Belding. I think he's changed the paradigm, how we think about education. He's set up what are called wildly impressive goals in each of our campuses. And the campuses have bought into that. And I think it's having a very positive effect.
That's always good. Now, one of the things when it comes to, high school and our education system, somewhere along the line, it shifted heavily into the track of you go to high school, you go to college, and everything that was set for it was basically preparing you for college. The district has done some things on CTE, like the mile. That's something that the district is very proud of. Do you think that the district is doing enough to get into, CTE or preparing kids for life instead of, college?
I think we're working on that. CTE is a very important issue. Back when I was a kid, it was called vocational ed. Right. And so I think it's very, very important. A starting plumber can make a huge salary. And when they own the plumbing company, they can get rich. And so we do need new trades. But there are obstacles with that also. But what I want to say about CTE is that if we send a student to CTE, and by the way, just a side note, I went through CTE one night, and they have the security, the IT people in there, the students who are learning computer technology. And that night they were talking about passwords, and they wanted to see how long it would take to hack your password. And I thought, wait a minute, this is getting too close to home right here. They were very good at that. I could take some of their information and use it. But here's what I was going to say. If we train these students in these trades, whether it's internet, whether it's aerodynamics, whether it's plumbing, whether it's culinary arts, no matter what it is, but they don't understand the basic principles of reading, writing, math, etc., and civics. What makes our country great? What's our history? What's our foundation? What's the virtues and values that made the United States of America the great country it is, and that will provide for them an opportunity? If they don't understand entrepreneurialism, and by the way, we have a good program for that at MISD, and I'm proud of that program. But if they don't understand those things, and we just put them in a trade, then they're not going to appreciate the country that gave them the opportunity to practice those trades. And you yourself, DV, you were a combat Navy veteran, and you fought for those freedoms that we should teach our students to value. And you fought for the ability for our students to learn reading, writing, math, computer tech, whatever it may be. And those are the things I think are the foundation that regardless of whether they're going to the college or career or military, they need to be ready. But they need to be ready with understanding the country that has given them that opportunity.
Yes, I most certainly agree that we do need to teach civics and have people understand the role and what's not the role of government, and the importance of there's a lot of beautiful things that this country has done, and I don't think that gets enough emphasis nowadays. But preparing those, for me, I've always thought that, preparing these kids for the outside after high school is such a wonderful thing. As a matter of fact, right now, the Department of Labor, it's so bad right now for wastewater operators that they're pulling kids out of, whatever, you're in high school and you want to get into wastewater treatment, they will pay your whole way and buy your tools and get you hired. I mean, it's insane because we just don't have enough people doing wastewater, HVAC, electrical, cement. I mean, you name it, there's just not enough people getting into it. And private firms, the particular one I was talking to you about, the Department of Labor right now, they're actually getting funding in this program from private entities trying to get people trained up in this field. And they're doing it for other fields where these private entities are saying, hey, we need people. We need to start Encore. Encore's, if you could get into their program for linemen, and they'll pay your whole thing from high school on up. They'll pay and pay you a wage while you're going to training. It is insane. They need people, and those are jobs that are $100,000+ jobs. It's very well needed. So I always push on CTE. I've had a great life with knowing HVAC. It's provided, something that I'm glad I got from the Navy. It's been a skill that has done very well for my family. So I always support CTE, and I talk to every board member about it. So kind of going to hit you with a little bit of lightning round as we close out.
Well, let me say something about the CTE before we go off on that subject. What you said about linemen is absolutely true. Linemen for power companies are needed all across the United States. In my career, as far as land development and building, whether it's offices or homes, I worked with these tradesmen all the time. So I know the need, and what you just said is absolutely correct. Every entity that I know of, whether it's HVAC, plumbing, a framer, bricklayer, whatever it may be, everyone is looking for quality workers. And the opportunity in the trades is unlimited, not just to obtain a job, but to build a company of your own. And that is part of the American dream. So yeah, what you said is absolutely true.
Yeah. So I'm going to hit you with a little bit of questions before we kind of close out. There's been, one of the criticisms is, there's about your family and such, about not supporting public education. Do you support public education?
That is utterly insane, because for that comment to be made, they don't know. My grandkids have spent a total of 23 years in Midlothian ISD. I have been a taxpayer in Midlothian ISD for over 27 years. My company has probably spent 30 plus, maybe 35 years paying taxes for properties that we owe in MISD. I have never said anything disparaging about MISD. I love this district. I'm MISD proud, and that's why I'm here. But being MISD proud and being a supporter of MISD does not mean that I agree with everything that goes on, especially when it comes to those issues that we've talked about. And we need to be frugal, and we need to protect our taxpayers. We need to give parent transparency. We need to protect our students and raise our test scores, and we need to do good for our teachers. And so, yeah, I think that statement is just on face value. There is absolutely no support for that. Nothing. That it's something that my political opponents have come up with, and it has no bearing. I love this district. And one of the things that I have really loved even more since I've been in this district is I love the kids. I love listening to their achievements. I love seeing their awards and their advancement. I love that. I think it's outstanding. But I got to balance that. There was a mom stood right here in this study, an MISD resident. She has two sons. She graduated both her sons from MISD. She's a friend of my wife. She came in while I was in my study one night, and she said to me, Ed, I cannot pay my property taxes anymore. I cannot. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to have to sell it because I cannot pay my property taxes. And the highest amount of taxes that I pay are school taxes. And she asked me, what are you going to do about it? Well, I said, I can't do anything on my own, but I will fight for her right to keep that house. So we have to balance. We have a good school district, and it's going to get even better, but we also have great taxpayers, and we have to protect them.
There's been a lot of concern in North Texas amongst Republican circles about the spread or influence of Islam, Sharia, etc. Mm-hmm. There's been ridicule online about that and connected to you. So when it comes to that issue, what is your stance, and what do you have to tell the voters about that?
Yeah, I've seen the ridicule because I have brought up the Sharia issue, and I think it's very, very timely. I think it was Louisville ISD that actually had the Islamic Games, and it was finally canceled because of the pushback they had on that. We have functioning Islamic communities with some facets of Sharia within those communities here. One of the largest areas is right up north. But let me say this. Those who have criticized me don't know what they're talking about. Because last week at the State Board of Education in testimony, there was testimony concerning this very issue, and it was rejected. So if those here who criticize me, it's not because they're mean or anything like that. It's just they don't have understanding of this. This is an issue. No force starts out with 100% power. It creeps in and creeps in and creeps in. And all I have said is that I will resist Sharia influence. I don't take that back. I stand by it. I will resist Sharia influence in the Midlothian School District. And if a person has a problem with that, they don't really have a problem with me. What they're saying is, oh, that's okay. We won't resist the influence. And if they're saying that they won't resist the influence, there's a greater problem in there than me saying I will resist Sharia influence, just like I will resist DEI, CRT, or any woke agenda in this school district.
Well, that's something that these social issues, those are things that unfortunately they are part of the whole education system. And they're discussed, and some people do not like that, these social things are discussed, but they do happen. It doesn't come out of, thin air and no. Things kind of happen. So those things because those things happen, that's why people discuss like what happened at Wiley ISD, where, eventually they came back and said, oh, they violated protocol. Yes. But it did happen. It did happen in a school in Wiley and other schools. So
I mean, DB, to take off on what you're saying right there, think about what you just said. They have the Islamic Games, Islamic track events. That on its face is discriminatory. It's discriminatory against Christian. It's discriminatory against Jews. It's discriminatory, and it should not have been advocated. It should have never been allowed. And all I'm saying is I will not allow that type of stuff to come on at MISD. I don't know if I could stop it, but I'm the guy that will fight against it. I'm the guy that brought it up. And for those who are saying, oh, Ed is just making all this stuff up. No, what they're saying is we're good with it. And if you're good with it, that's a bigger problem than me being against it.
Well, Mr. Harrison, I went a little longer than I thought I would, but we covered a lot of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and be quiet, give you the mic so you could talk to voters of MISD voters.
Well, I'm honored to be on the MISD board. I work, like I said, for parents, for students, for teachers, and for our taxpayers. I want lower property tax bills, not just rates, lower property tax bills. And I am the one school board member who has never, or school board candidate who has never advocated for higher taxes. I have never advocated for DEI or CRT or LGBTQ plus or porn in our libraries. I will not stand for any of that stuff. I'm asking for your vote and your support. I need your vote. And if you believe that there should be a voice who stands up and doesn't just go along to get along, then I'm that voice. I will stand up for you. I will stand up for the constituents of the MISD, and I will always do what is right for you. I'm honored to serve on the board, and I would appreciate your vote.
Thank you again for coming on the show. Can you stick around real quick after the show?
Yeah.